Beck.
Welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Tonight, the government tells you what you want to hear. They're not telling you the truth, and quite frankly, neither is the media. Who are these people thinking they're fooling? Also, you can still buy a gun for now, but you're not going to be able to afford to keep it. Wait until you hear this story under the radar. And the unions say, well, it leads to prosperity if we have unions. Really? We'll see how full of crap that statement is. Oh, yeah. If you believe this country is great, but you hate watching our leaders just shred the Constitution, this is your call to action. Come on, follow me. Hello, America. Tonight, here's the hot list. These are the stories that the mainstream media is covering. Former White House Minority Whip Roy Blunt is officially a contender for the 2010 Missouri Senate race. Oh, good. Glad we could start another election season. Citigroup says one of its directors is going to keep being reimbursed for using its private jets, even though he's no longer on the board. And one person died in stormy weather that left parts of Georgia and Alabama covered in debris. But here is the one thing. I don't think anybody's getting the truth. And it's one reason that I'm doing this show, because I see it in a different way. And, you know, it's just my opinion. But the media seems to always miss the point. Take the mortgage bailout. I don't know about you, but for the last couple of days, I've been screaming at the television, I played by the rules. My house has lost value too. Are you going to bail me out? Now you're helping people with mortgages and basically giving bonuses to the banks if those people pay on time. Well, what about me? Do I get a bonus for playing by the rules? Do I get a bonus for not missing a single payment? How about you? How much water are you expected to carry for those who no longer carry any water? Let me be anti-media here for just a second. Let me break it down as Weekend at Bernie's. Did you see that movie? Do you remember? Here it is.
Best.
Oh, Bernie, you animal, you are insatiable.
You slay me, Bernie.
Bernie, I gotta talk to you.
Bernie's a little wasted right now.
Okay. Wow, that's a good movie, huh? Bernie, the dead guy in the sunglasses, is the mortgage industry. President Obama and his friends in Congress are propping him up, trying to make him look, hey, look at the mortgage industry. What? I'm not dead. And for a while, people might be fooled, but only the incredibly stupid. Eventually, the whole charade is going to come to an end. 45 million Americans have a mortgage today. 93% of them pay that mortgage on time. The problem is, the top of the housing bubble, in 2006 to now, home sales have dropped by 20%. That's resulted in a total loss of wealth approaching $3 trillion. But what nobody's really focusing on is, we're at the beginning of this crisis. The government keeps trying to fool us with makeup and sunglasses. What? It's going to be great in about 10 minutes. Hang on just a second. It's going to get really, really good. Obama is now pumping in $75 billion for the people who took risky loans and are guaranteeing another $200 billion to bolster Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac. These are the banks that went and bought the riskiest loans. They're the ones encouraging the risky loans. Considering that Americans owe $11 trillion in mortgage debt, it seems to me that this whole system is only scratching the surface. We are playing board games with a dead guy to make him look like he's alive. We should be putting him 6 feet under. This whole charade is based on the hope that the worst is already behind us with housing. Can I ask you an honest question? Do you really think that's the case? The country's top economic professors and minds, they project a home price drop of another 16% below where they were in 2006. I did the math for you. That's 36% down from the peak. That means if the government keeps propping up the dead mortgage industry, trying to keep inflating these ridiculous prices that all of us paid for our home, soon we're going to be on the hook for much, much more. I guess, just like, you know, in Hollywood, even a really bad movie can have a sequel. or 2 or 3 or 4. My listeners on my radio program today were pissed. I am hearing them say things that I've done radio for over 30 years. I've never heard America as angry as it is right now. And that's both left and right, Democrat and Republican. Bob O'Brien is here. He's a stocks editor for Barron's.com. Bob, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Glenn.
Okay, where am I wrong on this? Doesn't make any sense.
No, it's a little crazy. You're basically franchising, once again, the very people who caused the problem, and the way you're doing it is by going down the same path.
Okay, so what Obama said in his speech yesterday, and what I keep hearing today is, well, no, these are just people who are upside down in their mortgage. Well, I don't know about you. Are you upside down in your mortgage? I am. Are you upside down in your car? Every time you buy a car, when you drive it off the lot, you're upside down. You just don't sell it.
Yeah, and these problems are being exacerbated by the very people that we're now trying to bail out. Your home values have gone down because there's houses on your block that have been foreclosed and are sitting there empty, and it ends up looking, you know, like somebody with a smile with a couple of missing teeth. It's just not attractive. It's not attractive to potential buyers, and it's not attractive for housing values. So it's the people who have misbehaved who are making the value of your house go down, and now we're effectively rewarding them by bailing them out.
Now, there are some people that have lost a job and can't make it. There are some people who have to move because of maybe they lost a job or whatever. They must sell their house now. But that's not 11 million people. I mean, that's, or how many people are we covering on this? Some ridiculous.
9 million, 9 million's a minimum.
Yeah, that's not. 9 million people have not lost their job.
No, and you're talking about, you know, what they're describing as responsible people. This is half of the people who are going to be bailed out here are what they're describing as responsible people with conforming mortgages who are able to refinance up to 105% of their house's current value. If you need 105%, you're not responsible.
Oh, I swear to you, my head is going to pop. Bob, 105, how can he possibly say we're being responsible by loaning people 105% of their mortgage?
And then we're going to turn around and take people who have adjustable rate mortgages and subprime mortgages and really crazy non-conforming stuff and give them $75 billion and pay them to make their house payment. So
wait, say that again.
We're paying them.
Who are we paying?
People who took out non-conforming mortgages, people who are just completely irresponsible, bought too much home, bought too much.
I swear to God, chocolate is like, I'm becoming a big fat monster because I can't take it every day. I can't watch the news. I read stuff and I'm like, this is insane.
Wow.
You know what, Bob? I'm not a conspiracy guy, but this is so stupid that everything that's going on looks intentional. It's beginning to look intentional.
Well, what is intentional is there's nothing in this bill. Anybody out there who thinks, well, they're going to do something to lower interest rates. They're not lowering interest rates in the market. If you want to go out and get a new mortgage or refinance your existing mortgage, you're paying the current rate. You're not getting any kind of discount, the kind of discount that folks are going to get under this plan. And they're not going to do anything to stimulate housing prices. This is not a bill that is aimed at trying to remediate any of that 36% in home values that the average house is worth.
All right, so are they not also in this bill now giving $1,000 to the bank or the mortgage lender that lends or refinances these homes?
Yes. That's it. That's the incentive for the, because the banks.
Isn't that why we had the bogus numbers in the first place? Because we were incentivizing people to make loans to people that shouldn't
have them, and that had crazy terms and conditions. And this isn't going to really rewrite the loans. The other thing people think is this is going to lower what I owe the bank. Wrong. It's not going to lower what you owe the bank. It's just going to reduce the monthly payments and stretch out the process to a much longer period. It's not going to help with the essential problem here. But you're right, we're giving the banks, who are the bad actors in the first place, an incentive to continue to perpetuate this.
Oh, yeah.
And these are the banks that we've already given $350 billion in relief to.
I don't know what the vapors are. You know how they say, I think I have the vapors. I don't know what the vapors are, but I may have them right now, or it may be a brain aneurysm.
I have consumption.
Do you?
Yeah, I got it.
Jeez.
I got it about 2 weeks ago, and I don't know what to take for it. Maybe chocolate.
I tell you, you know what? You want something to invest in? Hershey's, M&M's, because people are eating chocolate by the handfuls because I can't take it. I swear, it's nature's own Prozac. All right. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Glenn.
All right. All of these things that you're seeing on television, nobody is speaking the truth anymore. All of the misdirection that is going on. I'm going to give you a gun story here in a second that will blow your mind on what they're doing with guns. The real question is, when you're looking at the mortgage stuff, is anybody in the media asking, where do we get all of this money? How does this work? Well, follow me. I'm going to go over to the big wall here, but first I want to give you this classic scene from It's a Wonderful Life.
No, but you're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. The money's not here. Well, your money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and 100 others. You're lending them the money to build, and then they're going to pay it back to you as best they can. Now, what are you going to do, foreclose on them?
This is the quintessential example. We're thinking about this all wrong. We're not really we're thinking about the foreclosure. We're thinking about saving the bank. But we're not really understanding how this whole system works. So I want to show you this tonight. If you'll take this away. Frank, thank you. Bring this up. This is just the way banks normally work. It's what he was just talking about. You know, Frank and everybody else, they put their money into the bank. Then when, let's say, I want to get a loan, there's the evil banker. And I mean, I don't think the artist needed to make me that fat. If I needed a loan, that's really disturbing. If I needed a loan, the banker gives it to me. But it's not his money. It's all of my neighbor's money going into the bank. That's the way it normally works. Okay, we learned that on It's a Wonderful Life. Now let me show you how our system of government works. Usually when they want to build a road, or let's say Big Fat Glenn needs something. Big Fat Glenn needs a favor from Big Fat Barney Frank. Barney Frank is there to save today. All right, so what happens? All of our money goes to the Treasury. This is our income tax. Goes to the Treasury. And Big Fat Glenn, he needs some help here because I've got some red-headed, ugly stepchildren, apparently. And Big Fat Barney Frank says, gee, Glenn, I'd sure love to help you out, so he sends me some money. That's how it, I guess, is supposed to work in our system. Everybody is paying the Treasury, and goes through Congress, and it comes to the people who need the help. Now, this is the way it's been happening for the last few years. Barney Frank's got some new friends. He's got the evil banker. He's got crazy Nancy Pelosi. And Barney Frank doing something he's never done before, shaking his head like, no. Here he goes. We've got a few problems here because there's not enough money coming over to the Treasury, because now we're starting to have hard times. Actually, for a while there, it's just that Barney Frank and his friends were spending it too fast. So where do we get the money for, let's say, a Big Fat Glenn spending bill? We need a spending bill, right? Well, Barney Frank will propose a spending bill. He'll send it down to the Treasury. Normally, if this was working right, the Treasury would just give him the money, but we don't have any money. So now we have to sell this bill to China. Oh, and Chairman Mao is more than happy to provide the dough for us. So he does. He gives us the money, sends it to Barney Frank and his friends, and Big Fat Barney Frank says, yeah, baby, have more children. You're Octodad. We love that. And I'm now, with my weird-headed children, enslaved by all of this money. That's the way it has been happening. Now let me show you what we've been doing in the last few months. Here it is. I've got more children. There's the one lonely dollar coming over to the Treasury. Here's the Big Fat Beck bill coming from Barney Frank up to China. But this time, China says, no thank you, because Barney's having just a little bit too much to eat here. So the Fed comes in. The Fed, remember, has been being bailed out. There's bailing out all of the banks. The Fed doesn't have any money, but they tell the Treasury, we'll give you IOUs. Trust us. the evil banker who's no longer being seen behind Barney Frank is good for it. So the Fed gives the IOUs, the Treasury prints the money, gives it to the Fed then gives it to Barney Frank, who then sends it to all of my ugly little red-headed stepchildren, and that's the system we're operating on. But here's the problem. See, you don't understand it, just like Jimmy Stewart said. This system can't last. We can't keep printing money because the government becomes bigger and more bloated, and before you know it, buttons are flying off of his shirt. And there's really nothing left except a bunch of children who really don't know how to work anymore. They don't know what to do except stand there and go, I need some money. And the Fed is remaining standing. The Fed, the one thing that it seems to me nobody is questioning. What's your role here exactly? Back in a minute. You know, I have to tell you, I keep seeing that commercial, and it's hard. Giving you reason to believe in America again. Look, I believe in America like nobody's business. I'm a small business owner myself, and I run a magazine and radio show and everything else. And I work with people who are all from different walks of life. Liz is my editor of my magazine. She voted for Obama. She's just a liberal. She used to work on a goat farm. Every year with a bonus I give her, she buys a goat in my name just to piss me off. She came into my office today and we were talking about different things, and I said, how you feeling, Liz? How you feeling about the country? It was a great, refreshing conversation because it wasn't about politics at all. It wasn't about the candidates. It wasn't about anything. It was about the country. She teared up, and I did too. She said, Glenn, I am afraid. I fear for my country. Please, please, don't dismiss your gut. Don't listen to the people who say, oh, no, everything's fine, everything's going to be great. It is up to you. You are the guardian of liberty. Tomorrow on this program, we're going to do something very, very different. Tomorrow, we are going to, I've asked some of the best minds in America to think the unthinkable. Why? Because people say, oh, if we don't do this, it will be bad. But nobody even will tell you what that means. I don't even know what that means. So we put together different scenarios. How bad could it be? Again, not to spook anybody, but so you can look it in the eye and say, okay, if that's my choice, I'd rather do that than be a slave to a big government. Also, because I learned something from a Ben Sherwood book, it was one of the best sellers that's out right now about survivors. The people that survive are the ones that have looked at the wing of the plane and went, I wonder what I'd do if that wing ever caught fire. The wing is on fire, gang. Let's look it in the eye. Let's know what could possibly could come. Hope that it doesn't come, but prepare just in case. That's tomorrow night. Please, tell your friends, tell your family. Join me tomorrow, because we're on the road to socialism. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, here it comes. Oh, no, look it. Oh, oh. All right, here's the latest one. Because, again, kind of the theme of tonight's show is it's never really the story that everybody's talking about. It's the story behind the story. What have people been talking about? Oh, Obama's going to come in and take your gun rights away. He's just going to go ban all guns. No, he's not. This is the way it's going to happen. Try this story that nobody's talking about in Illinois. You want to own a gun in Illinois? Well, now you may be forced to carry $1 million insurance policy to exercise your Second Amendment right. Excuse me? Here's Stephen Holbrook. He's an outside counsel for the National Rifle Association, author of the Founder's Second Amendment. You know, I heard this today and I thought, wait a minute, how much would an insurance policy cost for a gun? But it even goes further. Stephen, is it not true that what they're proposing is that everyone has $1 million insurance policy for their gun if they own a gun for accidents or willful harm done with a gun?
That's right. We start with the fact that in Illinois, gun owners are already regulated quite heavily. You have to have a firearms owner's ID card, and if you don't have that, you can be convicted of a felony. So the proposal that's been made by Illinois Representative Ken Duncan is that if you don't have a $1 million insurance policy to cover liability, then your firearm owner ID card gets revoked, and either you get convicted of a felony for owning guns because your papers are not in order, or you can't own a gun. So unless you're very wealthy, I mean, if you're a poor person and you need to protect yourself in your own home, you can't do that because this bill would require these onerous fees for insurance. I can't imagine what the policies would cost. It's unprecedented that an ordinary gun owner would have to...
Hold on just a second. Let me help you out on this, Stephen. And how much would this cost? America, you ready for this? For negligent use of a gun, there are 0 insurance companies that will insure you now for negligence on a gun. 1 company in America will insure you if your gun is stolen. 1, but no one. You know, this is like, correct me if I'm wrong here, Stephen, this is like saying, I'm going to go buy a rope, but I need to have an insurance program that will pay somebody $1 million if I intentionally use that rope to hang myself. Who would insure that?
The only insurance policies that are available would be against theft, where you would be reimbursed if your gun collection was stolen. But in terms of liability for negligent or willful misconduct against another person, that's just not available. So what we're doing here is trying to impose basically a requirement that you cannot get to exercise your Second Amendment rights. Can you imagine if we carry that to your field of endeavor, First Amendment rights? You might defame somebody, so why don't we require you to have some insurance policy against libel and slander? Or if you want to protest in the street or have a demonstration, you've got to have an insurance policy before you can exercise your right to free assembly because of the possibility there might be a riot. And of course, we're talking about law-abiding gun owners who go to the trouble of having these firearm owner ID cards. The people who commit crimes in Illinois and elsewhere don't have firearm owner ID cards. They're not going to have the insurance. This is only another scheme to harass and to regulate gun owners and to basically prohibit the exercise of Second Amendment rights.
If I'm not mistaken, Stephen, it's either 10 or 20% of murders in Illinois are committed with a knife. Should we have insurance for every knife we buy as well? This is the way it's all going to come down. Barack Obama said yesterday that he's not going after the Fairness Doctrine, and America, mark my word, he will not go for the Fairness Doctrine. It will come from a different direction. When they talk about unions and the card check, it's not going to be card check. It is going to be fast track. And when it comes to guns, he'll never ban guns. He'll just make them impossible to buy because of all of the rules, the regulations, and it will be wildly expensive. Agree or disagree, Stephen?
Think about the fact that gun ownership, it's becoming like a minefield that you've got to walk through, or else you're going to be convicted of a felony and go to prison for the violation of some technical requirement. If you're not able to get insurance and you're just there peacefully abiding by your own business and not hurting anyone, let's put you in prison because you didn't fulfill this insurance requirement. And by the same token, the people who commit crimes don't do any of this. You know, Chicago has a horrible murder rate. They have a horrible crime problem. And so why don't we harass law-abiding gun owners to do something about it? I mean, that really helps.
All right, Stephen, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And by the way, America, for the love of Pete, the founders weren't like, gee, I don't know, what kind of sport should we put into the Second Amendment? I don't know, I kind of like soccer. They didn't put it in for the sportsmen. It was to protect ourselves from an out-of-control government. Read the Founding Fathers, and you'll see. I'm sorry, I don't mean to insult you. Pinheads in Washington, read the words of the Founding Father. Well, I mean, I don't know why. Are you looking for my bald spot? Is that what we're doing? What the heck? All right. So what is the right thing to do here? It all comes back to the 9 principles and the 12 values of our You're Not Alone project. Question, should the government use backdoor tactics to shut down the Second Amendment? Principle number 9, the government works for me. I don't answer to them, they answer to me. If this makes sense to you, it's our You're Not Alone project. You're not alone. Email your pictures to wesurroundthem@foxnews.com and make sure you watch our special on Friday, March 13th. Now, I saw a story on TV about Octomom. Buying $14 lip gloss, blood started to shoot right out of my eyes. Actually, do we need to care about this story? Oh, yeah. Why? I'll tell you next. Just ahead, Union states are better and more profitable. Detroit is great, and I haven't seen a cupcake in months. But first, your headlines from Fox Central with Patty Ann Brown.
Okay. Can we hold you to that?
I'm just saying.
Okay.
One of those things is not true. Maybe all of them.
All right, gotcha. All right. In the news right now, breaking news, in fact, tonight on the missing Texas tycoon at the center of an alleged $8 billion fraud scandal. The FBI says it has just tracked down R. Allen Stanford in Fredericksburg, Virginia. He was served with civil legal papers from the Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC charged Stanford and 3 of his companies on Tuesday with committing fraud that lured investors with promises of unsubstantiated high returns. He is not under arrest and is not in custody. It was the first foreign trip of his presidency, but he didn't go very far. President Obama visiting Canada today, one of our key economic allies. Canada and the U.S. have the largest trading relationship between any 2 nations in the world. At a news conference with Prime Minister Stephen Harper earlier, the leaders talked about increasing trade and a new deal to boost green energy development to help combat climate change. And the United States has a new top spy. CIA Director Leon Panetta was sworn into his post today by Vice President Joe Biden at the agency's headquarters in Virginia. Panetta will oversee directives from President Obama to put an end to the use of harsh interrogation tactics and to close secret CIA prisons. And those are your headlines. I'm Patty Ann Brown. Glenn Beck returns live in a moment. But first, Brett Baer has a preview of Special Report tonight. Hey, Brett.
Hey, Patty Ann. Coming up, we'll take a look at the drug violence crisis in Mexico and what the Obama administration is now saying about it. Is Pakistan really helping the U.S. fight terror? Plus, some governors may not take their stimulus money. We'll hear from one, and Britt Hume has analysis. Join me at 6 Eastern for Special Report. Now back to my colleague, Glenn Beck.
All right, as I'm driving into work today, I'm hearing about Octomom. You know, the woman who has 14 kids. By the way, just an ADD moment here. When I think of Octomom, I always think that she looks like this. Could you put that on the screen behind me? I mean, it's Octomom. She's got the tentacles reaching out into our pockets. Ah! All right. So some people on TV now are stalking this woman and screaming that she's using food stamps. She's on welfare. She spent $14 for lip gloss. And I'm thinking, why do I suddenly care? Why this woman who I'm never going to meet, and she's bizarre, and she's like Michael Jackson with the surgery and the tentacles and the suction cups. Why do I care what she's paying for lip gloss? Well, it's because she can't pay for the lip gloss. It's socialism. You know, we now have to care about 350 million people and what they're doing with lip gloss. The media is pointing their finger at Octomom. She's a freak. We got it. Move on with our life. She's the heroin addict, not the dealer. You want to stop this? It's not by humiliating the heroin addict. It's by making her go cold turkey. We should help her by cutting her off. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story should be, who's the dealer and who's the supplier? Why is no one in the media pointing their fingers to them? Americans are living in a culture of entitlement. Dr. Keith Abloh joins us now. And Keith, I'm a big fan of yours, as you know. I'm glad you're here.
Well, Glenn, it's mutual.
Well, thank you. You know, you and I have talked several times before. I am a big fan of personal responsibility, and we have completely unplugged. And I want to get to what are the ramifications of that. But I want you to talk a little bit about, for instance, the new study that came out of California that shows that students believe that they now are entitled to a B for just showing up. Where does this come from?
Of course they believe that. It comes directly from the cultural trajectory that we've been on. They want something for nothing. They feel if they're present, they ought to be rewarded. They should be made to feel good. There should be a drug there in the classroom waiting for them when they sit at their desks. They don't need to prove anything about performance or character. They should simply play the role of a student, act like a student, show up for a camera to photograph them maybe, and get a B at least and maybe an A. to bolster their false self-esteem further.
This comes from the stupid kids or the slow kids getting the trophy or, you know, getting passed in the next grade. Look, I don't want you to pass my kid if they don't deserve it. I don't want my kid to get a trophy, because if I am harder on my kid on their studies to make sure that they're performing instead of just passing, my kids will be getting fries from your kid who's working the McDonald's window. Just saying.
Well,
somebody has to work it.
But you're a friend of reality. You're not afraid of pain. Right now, we are running from suffering. We don't want anyone to experience what it might be like to look at another child on the soccer field and say, well, that kid got a trophy and I didn't. We don't want that suffering. We don't want homeowners to have to do any soul searching and say, well, I guess I tried to bolster my self-esteem falsely by living in this palatial home. And now there's kind of trouble with that.
Keith, I read a lot of the Founding Fathers, and I know that we're basing everything that we're doing now on Franklin Roosevelt, and not Benjamin Franklin. But Benjamin Franklin said the best way to help people is make them feel uncomfortable in their poverty. You know, as a government, we can reach out to each other as people, but you don't really enslave them. And I fear that's where we're headed, for slavery.
No question. Here's the thing. It's Psychiatry 101. To the extent that you hobble your kids by suggesting to them that they can't stand on their own 2 feet, that you need to bail them out all the time, that they're not capable of getting good grades, you'll have kids who come back home again and again saying, I can't find work, I can't make it at college, I can't get a job. Bottom line is the same thing is true with the society. You can hobble your populace. You can feed them so much in the way of feel-good stuff that they're intoxicated. Tough love is gone, and you just dole out more drugs. And the trouble with that is you can get people who never are then able to say, okay, I want to right myself. I want to stand on my own 2 feet. They'll keep going back to the government. It's the sole source of power at that point.
I fear, and we're going to talk about this on the special a little bit tomorrow. I fear, though, that we are headed for not just, you know, socialism like Canada has, where everything's fine, you get cheese and, you know, you build snowmen or whatever you do in Canada. But you come to a point to where, especially if the globe collapses, you could have nasty, nasty people. We now have, you know, on the road to fascism with a smiley face, as George Carlin used to say, but we could very easily be held down by a fascist leader without the smiley face.
Absolutely. Look, you can almost see the story unfolding in a very bad way here just by looking at the underlying psychology. Liberty requires autonomy, and it requires character. To the extent that you take your people and you weaken them by entitling them and therefore suggesting to them that they can't stand up for themselves, there's a power vacuum created, and there are bad guys out there who are happy enough to fill it with a totalitarian regime.
Oh, yeah. There are plenty of bad people that would love to have control over a bunch of people. Thank you very much, Keith. And you know what? That's part of the problem, I think, with... I'm not an anti-corporation kind of guy, but these gigantic corporations, they don't view our country, or quite honestly, you, as anything other than a market. You're not people. We're not a country. We're just a market. That's got to stop. Now, on the other side of the giant corporations are the giant unions. They're doing the same thing. Some people say, you know, unions are great. Really? Are the states with strong unions the most prosperous? The answer is next. The country is changing fundamentally, and it is changing overnight. Progressives and their friends in the government can't get enough of the union. And I saw this quote from former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, and I thought, you got to be kidding me. How does anybody believe it? Here it is. Unionization is not just good for workers and unions. Unionization is very, very important for the economy overall and would create broad benefits for the United States. If they did have higher wages and benefits, then they would have purchasing power they need to buy more of the goods and services that this economy produces. That would strengthen the economy overall. I mean, I took like 40 seconds just to think about that one, and I went, well, if unions are so great, wouldn't that mean then Detroit would be Disney World? Shouldn't that be the most prosperous place on earth? Here's Tim Phillips, president for Americans for Prosperity. Tim, Help me out on this one.
Well, sadly, there's delusion going around, and he's drinking the water, clearly. When you look at the numbers, states that are non-unionized, where people have the freedom to choose whether to join a union or not, that's where prosperity is, and that's where job growth is. And it only makes sense, right?
Right.
When people have a chance to choose whether or not they're going to join a union over being forced, coerced into joining a union, prosperity results. Jobs are created. When you look at the numbers, they bear this very fact out.
Okay, those are the states that are the free states. Colorado just changed, right?
Yeah, 22 states are free states, 28 states are forced union states.
Okay.
And when you look at the numbers here, it's mind-boggling.
All right.
Flip to the next chart.
Go to the next chart. What are the numbers here? Do you have the numbers? Which numbers are you looking for?
We're looking for the GDP and the job growth, private job growth.
Okay, private sector
When you
job
look at the increase in jobs, the right-to-work states are exploding. 39% job growth, 39%, the union states, 29%. Yet unions are the ones that are supposed to be creating jobs, right? The reality does not bear that out. And then the growth is the most stunning thing. Growth is really just measurements of prosperity. Are jobs being created? Are people having a higher standard of living? When you look at those numbers, you see it's almost 2 to 1. It really is 2 to 1. In free states, right-to-work states, people succeed and grow and have jobs, and that's what we're talking about.
You can. I mean, I just finished a stage show. I did a one-man stage show, and had to do it because it was here in New York. Had to do it with a union.
Right.
I actually had to pay somebody to stand behind somebody who wasn't union all day. I asked for water backstage.
Amazing.
I'm not kidding you. In Philadelphia, at the Kimmel Center, it cost me, I think it was $400 or $450 to put water backstage. I said, I'll just bring my own water. Couldn't do it. Now, how could you possibly tell me that that's good for the country?
Well, it's not. And when you look at population growth, people are voting with their feet. These right-to-work states where there's freedom, population is exploding there. They're beating more than 2 to 1 in population growth, the states that are forced union states. So people vote with their feet. When they have to use these silly rules you just mentioned just to get a job, they get out of there. They go to states where there's freedom.
Back in just a second with a little bit more. My producer just said in my ear, hey, Fat Glenn is on the front page of FoxNews.com. Well, that's not necessary. That is the money thing that we showed you earlier. You can download it and send it to your friends and make sure that they know what's going on. Listen, I want you to understand, this show is fair, but it's not necessarily balanced because it's my opinion. That's just the way it is. Get over it, Jack. We're talking to Tim Phillips a little bit about, he's with the president of Americans for Prosperity. We're talking to him about the unions. Something that I read from Robert Reich that you'll hear everywhere else about, oh, how states with the unions, oh, they're great. You know what's going to happen is people will have more money because they'll make more money. Well, businesses will go out. Give me productivity in union states versus non-union states.
They always make that claim, the unions do. Hey, we're going to increase productivity through the union. But when you look at the numbers, they don't bear that out. Right-to-work states, free states, the productivity is actually higher, Glenn, and here's why. The workplace rules put in place by the unions kill creativity. They stifle innovation. When people have the chance to freely work and innovate, they're more productive, and that's what happens in the non-union states. The right-to-work.
Go back to that slide just again for just a second, please. Okay. Job growth, 17.6% in right-to-work states, 8.9%. And this is the same thing we learned in the Great Depression, is it not?
That is exactly right. And when businesses have a chance to go where they're free and where workers are free to choose whether or not to join a union and take on those onerous new workplace restrictions, that's where the jobs go. I mean, there is a reason Michigan, which is the poster child for forced unionism, right? 10.6% unemployment, highest in the country.
Well, but wait a minute. Let's be fair here. They would say that, well, that's because, you know, the car manufacturers, they just stink on ice. And I personally think that the union workers and everybody they have made really good cars. They've gotten over that hurdle. We ain't making a Pacer anymore. But they'll say that that's the company making bad decisions.
If it was just 1 or 2 years where the unemployment rate was higher in Michigan, that argument may make sense. But for 6 years in a row, Michigan lost jobs. 6 years in a row. You can't blame all of that just on a down year or two for the automotive industry. The proof's in the numbers there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
By
the way, let's go to number 9, our 9 principles and our 12 values. The question is, should we all go union, become a socialist collective, work for the collective? Principle number 7, I work hard for what I have, and I will share it with who I want to. The government can't force me to be charitable. And really, I think that is exactly what unions are. The good workers, the hard workers, are subsidizing the bad ones, the ones that should be fired. Principle number 8, it's not un-American for me to disagree or share my personal opinion. That one's important, because I have a feeling people with my point of view going to be hard to listen to after a while or hard to find. If any of these things make sense to you, you're not alone. Email your picture to wesurroundthem@foxnews.com, and don't you dare miss our special. It is Friday, March 13th on this. You don't want to miss it. Have your friends with you. Final thoughts next. You know, I know we don't know each other, but I feel like I know you because we're not all that different. I love this country, and so do you. I think you fear for our future, not maybe even for our future, but the future for our children. We're both genuinely concerned about the direction that we're going. It's not a political thing, not a Republican or a Democrat thing. Look at what we're facing right now. It's not just the road to socialism or the stimulus bills or extremism at home and abroad or the war on the border that's being ignored now. It's how all of these things are coming together. It is the perfect storm. So tomorrow, I'm going to do something a little different on this program. For 1 hour, it will not be February 2009. Instead, it will be February 2014. While everyone will tell you that the worst-case scenario is impossible until it's right on top of you to tell what it is, we're going to do our best. We're going to look ahead at what could happen in the not-so-distant future if we don't wake each other up. We're going to go into the war room and see what this country looks like if U.S. banks have been nationalized and unemployment hits unprecedented levels, America's credit rating is downgraded, or we just keep printing money. What happens if Mexico grinds to an economic halt and narco gangs take over south of the border? What happens if California fails? What will we do if there is civil unrest around the world and we can't afford anymore to be the world's policeman? Tomorrow, we war game it out with the help of former CIA agents, economic experts, and expert on trends to see what it's really going to be like if we don't do something.